My name is Jameela Jamil and I'm an actress and an activist. I am an advocate for equality, for representation of diversity, and I am fighting the system that tries to berate women and undermine them and tell them that they are worth nothing more than just their aesthetic. Essays on shame, that's what my book is about, and shame is something that I've had to navigate my way through my entire life, and I wasn't really armed with enough information as a child and as a teenager. A lot of the things that I faced in life are things that I was never prepared for. I'm interested in shame around poverty because I think shame is used as a tool against people who grow up with no money. It puts the blame on them for their circumstance, and while everyone has probably got some accountability for some of their decisions in life, the system is set up against poor people just to keep them down and keep stepping over them, and people who have more money than them are able to keep pushing them further and further down. Despite my accent, which is an accent I developed at 11, so that I could fit in at my fancy secondary school, I grew up with no money, and I was raised by a single mother, we relied on the council to provide us with housing, and I was a very, very sick child who, without the NHS, would definitely be dead, 100% be dead now. I wouldn't have made it past about 7. I was deaf growing up as a child. I can now hear because of NHS doctors, wonderful doctors who were paid for by the state, and I wouldn't have had access to schooling. My scholarship was an assisted place at secondary school, to which I got to go to an amazing school where I was educated well. And so all of these things were set up because I grew up in, I feel like, the last time that we used to actually recognise that people had just fallen on hard times and the state would help those people, and now we're starting to just point a finger at those same people and try and blame them and distance ourselves from them and almost kind of dehumanise poor people in order to relinquish ourselves of the feeling of responsibility. The way of distracting everyone is to turn us all against each other. Another thing I feel about why we try to blame, in particular, poor people is because I think, this is just my personal opinion, people are afraid that that could one day happen to them, and their fear of that happening to them makes them want to just reject it as a possibility by saying, no, you must be responsible for what happened to you, you've messed up, you've ruined it, and that's why this has happened to you, and that means that it would never happen to me. Whereas actually, anyone can fall on hard times, anyone can get sick, anyone can suddenly face a huge illness or a disability within their family. You don't know what's going to happen to you, and it can happen to you, and if it does, God help you, because the system is no longer designed to protect you. I think growing up poor just gives you a sense of hopelessness as a child. Generally, as a very young child, you don't really notice. You just have what you have. And if you grow up in a poor area or surrounded by other poor kids, you just see that you've all got the same stuff. I think as you get into your teens, when material objects become more important, and especially with society telling you that you need to have material objects in order to be worthy of anything, in order to be cool and trendy, I think that's when you really start to notice it. But when it comes to studies, you can't afford certain books, or your school uniform is a bit more raggedy than other people's. It's more of an emotional, it is definitely an emotional journey to grow up with less money than other kids. And also, mostly, which I think we don't talk about enough, is the stress that being poor brings to your parents who are responsible to you. Politicians deliberately, especially in the last 10 years, use more words that allude to people who are on benefits or who are in need of help from a system without acknowledging that the fact that there just aren't enough jobs for so many people, and there aren't enough houses for them to live in that are remotely affordable, especially not within the big cities. They just sort of treat them as lazy dependents, sort of vampires just sucking the blood of the economy, of the British economy. I think one of the things that I most experienced was within my community of people who grew up with not very much money was being made to feel like we felt sorry for ourselves, and that we enjoyed living off the state on barely enough money to live, and that we were lazy, and that we didn't care, and we didn't try, and we had no ambition. Whereas nobody wants to live like that. The narrative that's written in the media around poor people is where you really see the discrimination take place, and also the case studies that they choose to show us of people who are poor are always so extreme. And you have these single mothers who are being treated like these vampires of society, just having more babies to be able to collect more checks. They don't live in comfort. children are very expensive to raise. These people would never choose this life for themselves. They're sort of dealt these cards because they're neglected, and then they're demonized for that. I think there's a deliberate twisting of the story of poor people in order for the media to help the government justify not helping them, making them seem like they don't want to help themselves. In order to twist the narrative around all poor people, they'll find a picture of like one young man smoking weed in a council flat, and they'll use that image as the poster child for all poor people. They're all lazy, they're all drug addicts, they don't care, they don't have any ambition, they don't want to get jobs. But they don't show the picture of the man, the billionaire with the offshore account. They're not showing pictures of him living it up, just burning cash, with a tax situation that is set up for him to not actually have to put the money that he's earning back into society. Look at the situation in America where someone gets cancer or their child gets cancer and they end up on the street because that's it. You are bled dry of all of your funding and there's no system set up to help you. This is what's going to happen in the UK, and no one really understands that because it's kind of, we're being distracted or we're being blamed and we're being told to look inwards, look at ourselves rather than actually look at the people who are responsible for this. I'm currently living in a country where there is no setup whatsoever. There is no net to catch you if you fall. And if you fall upon hard times, you're basically dead. A lot of the homeless people out here aren't alcoholics and drug addicts. A lot of them are sober and they're just people who got sick and couldn't pay their medical health care bills. If these systems are taken away from us and privatised, we are all royally fucked.